Well, I think that there are several things that these 2 years have been very exciting for me, and I think that they have provided a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to grow as an organization as well as increase the level of services for our community. Uh, we have experienced significant reductions in crime overall in the last 2 years. Approximately 15% of the serious crimes have been reduced in the past 2 years. We have increased our level of efficiency in many areas. We have reduced some of our operational costs. I think we have increased our ability to work with the community. We created the community forums. We have also created community police advisory boards at each of our police stations. We have increased our interaction with the local schools in order to provide for intervention programs. Um, so there's a whole host of things that we have done in order to improve our services. We've also increased the training that is provided to our police officers, and the organization is evolving. We're in difficult financial times, and we're trying to look for ways to reduce our operational cost and yet not to reduce the level of services to the community. Well, I think by and large I was pretty familiar with the city. I did a lot of research prior to coming to the city. I understood the financial problems that the city was facing. I also knew some of the social problems that the city was encountering. So I think by and large I had a very good idea where the department was, where the city was. So there really hasn't been many surprises. I think the city is certainly safer if we use crime reductions as a benchmark of what makes a city a safer place to be. The crime in the city overall is lower. In the areas where we've had some issues, we have improved our ability to resolve those issues. Clearance or crime clearances by detectives is higher, meaning that we have been able to determine who the people were that committed the crime, and we have been able to make the arrest on it. So overall, Mesa is a safer place today than it was 2 years ago. Now, does it mean that we are perfect? Obviously not. Do we need to continue to improve our operations? Obviously we do. I think there's a variety of things. I think number one, there is obviously technology is different than it used to be 30 years ago. I think also the public expectation of what police services should be is very different today. There's a greater demand on what police needs to do. People expect a different level of services. The complexity of the profession has increased tremendously in the last 3 decades. It is much more difficult being a police officer today than it was 30 years ago. I think both. I think it certainly made it more effective. I think that if we look especially at the crime reductions that have occurred nationwide in the last 15 years, they're very significant. And I think that technology and statistical analysis was a tool that assists us in getting to those reductions in many cases. Obviously, the more tools that you put in the bag and the more technologically advanced that those tools are, the more complicated that the work gets to be. I think this is a policy that has been developed over time. We have worked with a lot of different stakeholders in order to develop this policy. The policy provides an effective tool for police officers to crime fight. I think that when people are committing crimes in our city, regardless of whether they're here legally or not, we need to use all the tools available to us in order to fight crime and uh, improve public safety. If a person is here committing crimes and also happens to be here without documents, we want to make sure that our people can avail themselves of the tools uh, that are available in order to deal with people that are here illegally. I think the drawback and it's really something that has to do more with ourselves being able to educate the communities to let the people understand that the police department is here to serve every community. And if you're a law-abiding person, and the only the only activity that you're engaged in is crossing the border without authority, that's not going to be a primary focus for our department, and that's really a federal question. On the other hand, if you're here and you're here without authority and you are committing crimes, certainly we're going to use those tools in order to deal with the problem. The issue of racial profiling is very complicated. I think that there are constitutional questions when it comes to policing about equal protection under the law that are very complex for police to work with. I think that many times also there is a public perception that certain behavior by the police may be acceptable. People look at people and they say, well, wait a minute, they look to me as someone that has committed a crime. In the case of immigration, if they're brown and they appear to be poor, they must be here illegally, and therefore why don't you just go and arrest them? And obviously we don't get to do that. Constitutionally there are some safeguards against that. Conversely, I think that sometimes people assume that because police officers make a disproportionate number of stops on one particular group, that automatically translates that police officers must be racially profiling people. And the problem is neither one is correct. Sometimes officers' activities are going to be based on many different factors, and depending on the time of day, depending on the part of the city, depending on the type of activity that police officer is engaging in, he or she could disproportionately be making stops with one group that when you actually get to the bottom of them is very appropriate. On the other hand, just because somebody has a certain physical appearance or race or gender or something doesn't necessarily give the police a carte blanche to just make stops and go into a fishing expedition. So it is complex. There are many legal concerns that sometimes are not readily visible to many people. And it's an area that we have to continuously work with our people to train police officers, and we also need to continuously work with the community to educate them and understand what are the constraints and what do some of these legal requirements really mean, and what are the parameters that we can work under. I think that the illegal immigration question in our country today is much larger than anything that local policing can do. I think that illegal immigration is driven by economics, it's driven by political issues, it's a legislative problem, and I think until we have a legislative solution to illegal immigration that has to come at the federal level, it's going to be very difficult to fix the problem. And I think that anybody that believes that policing at the local level, or quite frankly even at the federal level, that policing can fix this, is not understanding the complexity and the legislative questions that are at hand. If you have anywhere from 12 to possibly as many as 20 million people that are here without authority on a variety of different levels, some of them crossing the border illegally and therefore committing a criminal act, some of them having crossed here originally legally but then overstaying their visa and therefore committing a civil violation, and you start looking at all the different components of this, I think that it would be naive to believe that this is going to be resolved through any kind of policing. Now, does police has a role into the question? Absolutely that we do. And at the local level, we have that role when people that are here without authority or without documents are also engaging in other criminal activity. At the federal level, certainly there's other avenues, including border controls and some of the other work that ICE does. But I think overall, until we come up with a legislative solution to this problem, this is not going to be fixed. Our focus has always been in providing for the safety of the people that live, work in the city, and certainly in the safety of anyone that wanted to come in here and exercise their constitutional rights to the freedom of expression. We focus on our public safety mission. We let other agencies focus on their own missions. We learn, sometimes we learn from other folks' experiences, and one of the things that we notice that occurred during the Phoenix event, as well as the one in Guadalupe, was that the emotions were running so high that there were very close calls in terms of people engaging in violent activity. You had demonstrators, you had counter-demonstrators, you had people that were carrying weapons, people that were threatening one another. In the case of Guadalupe, we know that the sheriff actually had to move his command post after the first night of operations because he publicly stated that he felt that the safety of the command post was jeopardized. We wanted to make sure, again, we were focusing in our mission in the city of Mesa, our mission being about public safety. We wanted to make sure that public safety in Mesa was going to be protected to the extent that we could. No, I mean, really not, because again, I mean, I think it's really important for everyone to understand that we're focusing on what we need to do in order to meet our mission, that is to provide a safe environment in the city of Mesa. We really are not focusing on anybody else's activity. We're inwardly focusing on, okay, as a police department here, responsible for providing for the safety of the people in the city, what do we need to do? And we basically, based on our best knowledge at the time and the information that we had, and based on my experience and that of others here, we elected how we were going to respond to that operation. But again, it's really important to understand we were focusing on our mission, not anybody else's mission. It's critically important for policing to communicate with one another. I think that there are a lot of things that work well when you have good interagency communication, and we have proven that over and over in Mesa here. We have worked with other East Valley agencies. We're continuously working with other federal agencies, ICE, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the U.S. Marshal's Office. In working with other local agencies, we have been able to enhance our ability to deal with crime fighting, and we believe that a lot of the reductions in crime in the city of Mesa have been a direct result of those partnerships. Conversely, I think when there is a lack of communication, I think that we all become less efficient, and I think that sometimes we actually get to jeopardize public safety if we don't communicate well with one another. I think it's very high, very good. Evidence of that is that we have the Information Fusion Center that is being housed here in the city of Mesa, and every other agency in the East Valley is a participant. We have a very active East Valley Chiefs of Police Association. We partner regularly in many operations, so I would say that the relationship at the chief level is very good, and so is it at the working and the operational level. Well, I think it's taught me a variety of things. I think that I came from a much larger agency where you had a lot of resources available to you, so I've had to learn how to operate, obviously in a smaller environment, but also not have some of the resources that I had available to me. I think also the level of experience within the agency. I came from an agency that has been operating in a large city for many, many years. So we have protocols to deal with large city problems. The city of Mesa is a city that has grown very rapidly in a very short period of time, and a lot of the protocols and a lot of the systems that are in place were designed to deal with a much smaller environment than what we work on. So I've had to learn to create sometimes systems and protocols that were not there in place before. Now, clearly my experience from LA has helped me greatly in order to achieve those, but I have had to learn to operate at a different level than what I was accustomed to. It's important to recognize that policing is always evolving, just like any other profession. Sometimes we're going to do well, sometimes we're not going to do as well. I think it's important to learn from our mistakes and to move on, but I think if you look overall at where the Mesa Police Department is today, and how much has been accomplished in the last 2 years, you see a tremendous amount of progress. It not only measure in terms of reduction in crime, but also I think it's important to measure it in terms of community service, the communication level with many segments of the community that before felt apprehensive about coming to the police department. The fact that we are looking for ways to reduce our operational cost and yet maintain a high level of police performance. Almost by every measure that you look at our police department today, we're doing much better than we were before. Crime is down, our clearance rate and our solving crimes has increased significantly. We have reduced our overtime costs. We have increased communication level with many communities that before were not communicating as well with the police department. So I think it's important to look at all these things in total and understand that policing is an evolving process and that we are hoping to get better every day.